August 480 BCE. Picture standing on the edge of Greece, watching a wall of dust rise over the horizon. Xerxes I, king of the Persian Empire, was marching an invasion force so massive it required rearranging geography. He ordered his engineers to lash hundreds of warships together across the Hellespont, creating a nearly mile-long pontoon bridge so his soldiers could walk from Asia into Europe. He even had a canal dug through a peninsula to save his supply fleet a few weeks of sailing. This chart shows the staggering ratio of that force. Modern estimates put the Persian numbers anywhere between 120,000 and 300,000 men, stacked against the roughly 7,000 Greek defenders sent north to block them. The math is horrifying. To Xerxes, this army was an announcement of absolute power. The monumental scale of the empire, seen here in the ruins of Persepolis, was now concentrated into a single marching line designed to make resistance look like a mathematical error. Facing this machine was Leonidas, king of Sparta, and he understood exactly the disadvantage his alliance was walking into. Leonidas couldn't even bring his full army. The Carnea, a sacred festival honoring Apollo, was underway. Spartan law forbade military campaigns during these holy days, so the ruling council allowed a forward force. Leonidas took 300 of his elite royal bodyguards, but he didn't pick them based on combat skill alone. He specifically chose men who already had living sons. He knew they weren't returning, and he needed to ensure their bloodlines would continue. With only a few thousand allied Greeks backing his 300 Spartans, Leonidas needed a battlefield that altered the laws of military physics. He had to find a geographic choke point that physically stripped Xerxes of his numbers. He found it at Thermopylae, meaning the Hot Gates. In 480 BCE, this was a narrow strip of rock and dust pinned between a sheer cliff wall on one side and the sea on the other. This map shows how that funnel operated. At the middle gate, the corridors squeezed down to barely 100 meters wide. When a massive block of Persian units entered, they violently compressed, forcing thousands of men into a space where only 50 could stand abreast. Hemmed in by rock and water, the Persian advantages disappeared. Shock cavalry couldn't flank, and mass arrow fire lost its value when the Greek line was directly in front of them. Into that gap, the Greeks locked a wall of bronze, overlapping shields edge to edge, with 8-foot spears layered forward in staggered rows. The front rank was completely protected by the shields behind them. When they pushed, the Greeks held. When the Persians pushed harder, the Greeks rotated. Fresh soldiers stepped forward, while tired ones rotated to the back to keep the line disciplined. Persian soldiers were walking into a meat grinder. They were throwing their bodies against a machine engineered perfectly to turn their numerical superiority into a liability. For 2 full days, Xerxes threw wave after wave into the pass. 10,000 standard Persian infantry broke themselves against the bronze wall. Frustrated, Xerxes sent in his ultimate weapon, the Immortals, 10,000 elite professionals. When one fell, another stepped in, keeping their numbers seemingly unbroken. Even Persia's finest couldn't crack the phalanx. The spears held, the rotation continued. The Immortals fell back, bleeding into the dirt, just like the infantry before them. The tactical advantage only collapsed from the inside. A local Greek man named Ephialtes walked into the Persian camp, motivated entirely by greed. He told Xerxes about the Anapaia Trail. Under the cover of darkness, thousands of Immortals marched through the hills above Thermopylae, guided by the traitor, bypassing the Greek choke point below. The moment the Persians navigated that mountain path, the physics of the Hot Gates inverted. The narrow cliff walls were no longer shielding the Greeks, they were trapping them. Before sunrise, Leonidas received the news. He called a council and ordered the bulk of the allied forces to retreat. The 300 Spartans stayed. 700 Thespians refused to leave them, knowing their own city lay directly in Xerxes' path. With the pass lost, Leonidas shifted his tactics. He abandoned the wall and ordered his remaining men to march forward into the wider section of the pass, attacking the Persian line directly. They fought to inflict maximum damage. When their 8-foot spears shattered, they drew their swords. When their swords broke, they fought with their hands and their teeth. Leonidas was eventually shot down by Persian archers deep in the enemy ranks. The surviving Greeks drove into the Persian formation 4 separate times in a ferocious struggle just to reclaim his body. They didn't crouch behind a wall and wait to be surrounded. They ran at the empire to prove a god king's elite soldiers were entirely mortal. If you look at the immediate aftermath, Thermopylae was a tactical defeat, the pass fell, Xerxes marched south, and Athens was evacuated and burned. But the psychological math of the war had shifted. Greek soldiers across the alliance had watched 300 men hold the greatest army on earth for days. Persia bled. The story of those men choosing to stay when they could have run spread from city-state to city-state. It gave a fractured, squabbling civilization the exact narrative it needed to believe victory was possible. 6 weeks later, the Greek fleet baited the Persian navy into the narrow Strait of Salamis. Using the same strategy of geographic compression, they turned Xerxes' numerical advantage into a liability on the water. Leonidas lost the pass, but his performance at the Hot Gates provided the blueprint for the Greek victories that followed. By proving a god king's finest could bleed, the stand at Thermopylae gave a divided alliance and momentum it needed to hold together and win.